Reading the polls after the acrimonious Clarence Thomas Supreme Court confirmation hearings, the president decided he needed to sign the Civil Rights Act of 1991 in order to get reelected. He had already vetoed the Civil Rights Act of 1990, claiming it was a quota bill, but in the wake of Clarence Thomas, he could not afford another veto. His core beliefs were irrelevant. All that mattered was winning. After a bitter and anguished struggle, a compromise was finally reached, and the Civil Rights Act of 1991 was sent to the president's desk for his signature. On the eve of the bill signing, the White House lawyer C. Boyden Gray emerged as the hangman. He circulated an executive presidential order to all federal agencies, directing them to comply with provisions that would end a quarter-century's worth of affirmative action and hiring guidelines benefiting women and minorities. When news of this executive order was leaked, the entire Bush administration was turned upside down. Frantic cabinet secretaries called the White House in an uproar, and civil rights leaders denounced the directive as an assault on decades of civil rights progress. Backed into an uncomfortable corner, the president's press secretary said the executive order, immediately withdrawn, may have been open to misinterpretation. The president signed the Civil Rights Act of 1991 on November 21st in a Rose Garden ceremony that was overshadowed by the intent of Boyden Gray's presidential directive. The president condemned the evil of discrimination and reiterated his support for affirmative action, but he got none of the credit he craved. Said Ralph Neese, the executive director of the Leadership Conference on Civil Rights, "There is no question that the Bush administration will continue to do everything possible to undermine the Civil Rights Act of 1991 and undermine the bipartisan enforcement policies of the past quarter century." Months later, the president missed another opportunity to mend racial divisions when rioting broke out after Los Angeles police officers were acquitted in the beating of Rodney King. The verdict was announced on April 29, 1992, as Bush was leaving a state dinner for the President of Germany. Standing in his tuxedo and black patent leather dancing slippers, the President of the United States made a statement that would be replayed for the next 7 days, making him look foppishly cavalier and out of touch with the real world. "The court system has worked," he said. "What is needed now is calm and respect for the law until the appeals process takes place." His remark was idiotic because when the defense wins a criminal case, there is no appeal. What erupted was bloody chaos and the violent deaths of 54 people in the most deadly riot in U.S. history. A tornado of destruction whipped through South Los Angeles, turning the Simi Valley area into an incinerator after 4,000 fires, staggering property damage to 1,100 buildings, 2,383 reported injuries, and 13,212 arrests. That evening, television viewers watched in horror as Reginald Denny was dragged from his truck and beaten by a mob. Many people blamed the President of the United States for not immediately stepping forward in a time of national crisis. Thomas Oliphant in the Boston Globe wrote, "Bush had nothing to say when it counted to address the searing pain, the anger in the soul that follows a miscarriage of justice of this enormity." The riots continued all day and all night through April 30th, when federal troops and the National Guard were sent in to restore order. The president tried to redeem himself with an impassioned speech to the nation on May 1st, again calling for calm. Whatever ground Bush might have gained with his speech was lost 3 days later, when his press secretary blamed the riots on the welfare programs enacted by Democrats during Lyndon Johnson's Great Society. The press secretary, Marlin Fitzwater, said, "We believe that many of the root problems that have resulted in inner-city difficulties were started in the 60s and the 70s, and that they have failed." The next day, Arkansas Governor Bill Clinton was walking the burnt-out streets of South Los Angeles, talking to Korean shop owners whose small businesses had been destroyed by looters. Even then, the President and the First Lady did not veer from their separate schedules of fundraising in Massachusetts and Ohio. Only after he saw his Democratic opponent on television, meeting with community leaders in Los Angeles, did the president realize that he too should make an appearance in the nation's second-largest city. He flew to California on May 6th, a week after the Rodney King verdict. He arrived on Air Force One and was driven like a potentate in his bulletproof presidential limousines. The crowds jeered, and so did the polls, which showed a drastic fall in his support since the rioting had begun. The Bush re-election campaign was in such disarray that Barbara sent up a flare for her firstborn. George W. took a leave of absence from Harkin Energy in June 1992 and began commuting from Dallas to D.C. to ride herd again for his father. Months earlier, Junior had warned the White House that Ross Perot was mounting a serious third-party assault on the presidency, but his father refused to take the Texas billionaire seriously. "He's an idiot," said the president. He told his campaign, "I'm not worried about him. You guys get paid to worry about him. If you want to worry about him, go ahead, but what are you going to do anyway?" In December 1991, the president called on his son to fire White House Chief of Staff John Sununu. Sununu had been using government planes for private travel, and young George dutifully delivered the chop. Later, W. told D Magazine in Dallas, "It's just not that often you can do something really meaningful to help the President of the United States." Unfortunately, the president, who gave full rein to his sense of self-entitlement, did not do much to help himself. Ignoring Ross Perot as a threat, Bush also dismissed Bill Clinton as an unworthy opponent. Despite polls that showed Clinton beating him, the president told his family and friends that the Arkansas governor did not stand a chance. He could not see a, quote, draft dodger, end quote, beating a decorated war hero. Neither could his wife, who went on television to say, "Bill Clinton and I have something in common. Neither of us served in the military. Ha ha." To George H.W. Bush, someone who was not from a family like the Bushes or the Walkers, a good family, simply should not be President of the United States. Clinton had more respect for Bush, or at least for Bush's campaign staff. Having spent 1988 getting his own private tutorial from a Bush strategist, Dick Morris, Bill Clinton was more than ready to take on the president. "I had worked for Bush in 1988 and was very involved with Lee Atwater and Roger Ailes in the anti-Dukakis campaign," said the political consultant Dick Morris. "I had run the campaign that defeated Dukakis for governor of Massachusetts in 1978, so I was kind of the House expert on how to run against the guy." Clinton had tremendous admiration for Bush's 1988 campaign, an admiration that was more related to Jim Baker as campaign manager, Lee Atwater as political strategist, and Roger Ailes, who did the media, said Morris. It was an admiration for the operatives, not the candidate. From them, Clinton learned a basic lesson. You never let an accusation sleep under the same roof with you. Answer it immediately. He adopted the war room mentality of rapid response, and he used it against